I have invited a group of brilliant, resourceful, experienced managers. So they will share with us their ideas, opinions, probably some life hacks of how to manage those herds of creative people that we'll be working with in the future, probably all of us, but about it in a second. From my right, Wojciech Borowski, CEO of McCANN Poland, Natalia Cetera, Head of Open Culture Studio, Digital Center, Katarzyna Wszola, Innovation Director of Veolia, Sebastian Kalemba, VP, Game Director at CD PROJEKT Red. I will be giving you questions, appointing you questions, but please join the discussion, jump in when you feel that you have something to add on to that. Some questions, just please keep them till the end for the couloirs, and now I'll focus on the discussion here. Okay, so to keep this, before the creative chaos takes over, I will start maybe with Wojtek to keep the alphabetical order, and so you'll be the first one. When studying the topic literature, I stumbled upon a quote saying, "Managers and marketers are from Mars, and the creatives are from Venus." Is the process of managing the other group is so different from the other one? What is your experience? What are maybe certain examples of such management processes?
Sure, I think the fundamental difference is I'm actually not a huge fan of the word manager. So you try to lead everyone in a, of course, very constructive way. And what's interesting is, of course, I guess in a way you manage more the business side, but you have to nurture the creative side. And that's the fundamental difference. If you try to manage creativity, then you stifle it, yeah? And it's as simple as that. And then sometimes if you try to nurture the business side, you don't really get the effects that are needed, yeah? So it's actually always a balancing act, yeah, of the way that you approach it. And one of the things that I find fascinating in my industry, I'm actually responsible for a group of 6 different agencies, specialized agencies. And I always laugh because it's a business and it's almost a job like herding cats, yeah? They're all going in different directions and you're trying to say, but no, actually let's go in this way. And you have to find the way, again, to nurture the very creative people in order that they go in the direction of the group, the agency. And you have to find a way to lead and manage the business people.
Okay. Natalia.
Yeah.
You're surrounded with artists.
Yes.
You work with them every day. They're undoubtedly very creative. So do you feel, adding on what Wojtek has said, do you feel that you should be creative when managing creative people?
That's a tricky question, to be honest, because I'm not so sure that you should be creative yourself. I mean, you should be to the extent that you should be open-minded when managing the creative team. But there's always a risk that if you are too creative yourself, you're gonna dominate your group and you're not gonna let them be creative on their own. So there's this thing of a balance that Wojtek mentioned, that everything depends on who you work with and what kind of person, what kind of manager you are yourself. Because there is always this element of ego of a manager, and especially if that's a creative manager, that is really tricky and can influence too much the team that you work with.
I got another quote of a managerial philosopher, savant, joking, it's by Bruce Lee, saying the creative process is a process of surrender, not control. Do you agree? Saying, basing on what you just said, that you have to let people more.
Yeah, definitely you should surrender your own creative ideas. You should be guided by them and you should keep them in mind, but you definitely have to spark these ideas in the other people in your team. So be creative, but to the extent of not interfering with creativity of others.
Okay. Nothing. I see. We still need some more up. So don't worry. I have some more quotes, interesting quotes. In my
so you
cup.
want us to start jumping in, I understand.
Yes, you don't feel it.
Okay.
Just feel
So
free to do
based
that.
upon what was said, I think that it is a good option to be a good observer when you are a manager, because it depends what kind of people you're managing. Because sometimes you can have people that will be really creative, and sometimes letting them by themselves will be very creative. But sometimes if you're managing a team that has a particular set of competences that it is really good to put into process, it will lead you to something unobvious, to something totally new. I mean here, because sometimes when we think about creativity, we think that if somebody is giving you 10 or 20 ideas out of the spark, this is the person that is really creative. But it is not always the case, because it is also really important to have people that will be creative, but in the next stages of this ideation phase, on the development phase, on the implementation phase. So it is really important to be aware of whom you're managing, with whom you're speaking, and with whom you can actually, how you can manage and transform this certain set of skills, tools, and processes to people that you're surrounded with.
I
So
hear you speaking out of experience.
So maybe I can give a little bit of a different perspective just to build on that. I mean, when you look at people that are true artists, yes, and why are they true artists? They see things differently. They can see things deeply. Yeah, they can see things that other people just don't see and feel. And why do they do that? Because they're much more fragile. Yeah, usually they have just a totally different depth of emotion, and that's why it's so incredibly difficult. And again, the balancing act of working with such people, because in a way that if you don't understand the fact that they are fragile, and you try to get them to be business people, then you start killing the creativity. But on the other hand, if you're just going into the fragile part, you're not getting out of any of the business output, yeah, and you're going in circles. So it's really actually a very difficult and interesting job at once, yeah.
Absolutely. I hope you hear me. I have a special mic today. Absolutely. And like following what you said is that it's actually it requires from the manager some kind of a level of empathy and the courage at the same time. Sure. Because let's say from the industry that I came from is we are constantly, you said about the Mars and Venice, right? We are talking about, I'm constantly repeating the dolphins versus wombats because it's a constant clash between an art and creative people and engineers, like to create those huge, vast worlds. In our case, and AAA's open world games, and it's really it requires a level of empathy, understanding, and the courage at the same time to really find a common denominator and the common language between all those two worlds. And there is a really cool quote I'm always repeating. That was actually, I think, mentioned by. I'm a huge Pixar fan, and there is Ed Catmull, the guy who kind of ran this whole show together with John Lasseter. And there is like when you enter Pixar, you have on the wall this kind of sentence that the art is driving is driving the creative process. That creative process is challenged by tech. This kind of a quote that I can maybe paraphrase it. Differently a little bit, but this is like this constant wheel of one challenging each other, and that gives such a cool outcomes very often. Sure. Yeah.
But I can also give some insight into the service industry, yeah, because many times when we're going to see clients, they don't want to see the business people; they want to see the great creatives. And we have this funny situation where actually many times the managers on the business side, our role is to protect the creatives from the client, so they can really be truly creative, rather than okay, but how's this fit in the Excel, and do you know the sales that we're having, and these people just freak out, and that's the whole thing. How do you bring these two worlds together, and you really come out with something unique? That end of the day in my industry, it is a commercial industry. We are trying to help clients sell, yeah. So it's everyone knows that, but it's again, how do you nurture the creatives? Like, how does the engine be in the car, you know, in the way for everything to go in the right direction, rather than trying to make it the trunk. Yeah.
And bringing it to the this process to the operational level, is it you were saying that it's a balancing between really letting the things drift and over management, right? Do those frameworks, deadlines, and this kind of things, do they give safety to the creative people, or are they kind of a burden for them?
Okay, please.
The funny thing is that at first, very often people perceive framing as limitation, and it's not true. It's actually the limitation, the framing, the vision, which very often is a framing, actually allow people to really spread the wings and actually builds the security, kind of like the secure vibe into the team, because people really know what they want to know. What's the direction? They are still looking for the solutions, but the direction is super important to really understand the goal, right? And so don't trust anyone saying that limits and framing is actually taking the creative part out of it. No, it's a bullshit actually. So,
And also to build on that, you have it's very interesting because I don't know how many of you have ever gone to a psychiatrist. I have, and one of the first things that you learn is they say, showing a boundary is actually an act of love. Yeah, so it's the first. So everyone thinks, and then I'm a father of 3 children, and what do my children need? They actually need to know the boundaries, and then they feel safe and they flourish. They don't want to have a world which is utter chaos and mayhem, and it's the same with creatives and everyone. Yeah, so it's actually showing the boundaries, which are concrete, is actually very helpful. Again, as long as it doesn't get too much into detail where we're saying this has to happen, this, because then it's not a creative process,
So how to find this balancing point, this that alchemistry, how to find it?
I think Wojtek already mentioned it. I think you should be a psychologist in a way. I mean, you should know your people, and you should know what are the boundaries.
As
Exactly. It's a little bit of both.
Or deadlines.
I can actually jump into our own business. So it is French EnergyUtility. So you can imagine that many really creative engineers that they know their field, the experts in their field. So if you are trying to think about something that is outside the box, we definitely need the framing. So the framing for us is the creative process. So we need to, what we do in Veolia, whenever we have a challenge that we are facing, we exactly design a process to it to some extent. It is a tailor-made process to put our people to certain tasks, activities, and then to pass forward to create something out of it. So we are not letting them just like, okay, do whatever you want, but the process, it takes step by step. Sometimes it is a very challenging one because it takes a lot of time. And I'm looking at people from Veolia because we have been going through this kind of process throughout this whole week. So it was kind of a challenge, but definitely something that is leading you towards, that is something that will lead you to particular product or service that you would like to fulfill, and using tools, but also letting people and their creative skills, competences that they have in different dimensions of it. So allowing it to explore, but also in a process that is very directed.
From what I hear, we talk less about management and more about leadership, which is again something that is very hard to capture. So, what do you think? What makes people in your teams more creative, except for deadlines that we agreed?
I think it's what's incredibly important, and that's why actually COVID was so difficult, is the energy. It's the interaction between people. It's the exchange of first the energy, then the ideas, then I call it intellectual ping pong, which then gets emotional, and this is really a whole creative process. So it's very, very difficult to have good creative teams and creative products when people actually don't like each other. or actually they don't want to cooperate. Yeah, I mean they don't have to be best friends. They don't have to go out after work for beers or whatever dinner, but it is very first of all to respect each other. Second of all, to trust each other, which is very important. Yeah, that everyone will deliver, and then thanks to that, you know, have the openness to interact. Yeah, and this is fundamental actually. So it's creating this culture. Yeah.
Yeah, the way you said it, like my first impression, my first thought was this Lencioni, pyramid, right? We just, let's say you have a trust at the base, and then you have not avoid the conflict and all this. Like, absolutely, you don't have to, let's say, be best friends, but let's say avoiding the conflict in the creative process, not being a critical, simply will cause not solving a problem, and not and you will finally end up with something which is vague. And the team needs to be creative, needs to be bold, needs to be true, and they simply need to trust each other, and this is actually tough, especially as you said, mentioned about COVID, that changed everything. And even right now, in my opinion, it was always very important. Right now, it's even more important, like the culture of the company, of the, let's say, the place you work at. That's the thing that at least, okay, we are not good friends, but at least we believe in the goal. We have one goal, we have one mission. At least that connects me, yeah? Because people really would like to know that the guy or the girl next to me that is making the coffee is someone that believes into same values. So this is super important, even more important right now, and than before when it comes to like building a cohesive, creative, I would say, product.
But what's fundamental and what's very interesting is fully agree with you don't want the conflict, but you have to have the feedback challenging culture, because you won't get any creativity if everyone's just patting each other on the back. Oh, great idea!
Like
well, it's a terrible
like
idea.
yes, man.
And that's where you need the trust. So when I say, listen, I'm sorry, but this is my point of view, and let me share it with you, and I tell you that actually I have a totally different one, we have to have trust for you to be able to accept it, and see value from it.
Exactly.
Because
So
again, it's one of these things. Yeah, what is feedback? Yeah, feedback is a great gift, as long as you give it in the right way, and the person that receives it feels that it's helpful. Yeah, even if it's not, always applauding. Yeah,
exactly.
So we move to the culture, but who creates the culture there? Then is it you feel it's bottom up, and is the team who builds relationships, or is it top down? Because I've read somewhere that if there's a bottleneck in the organizational creativity, it's usually at the top of the organization.
I can actually relate with this, because this is what we do and this is what we stumble upon working with creative industries such as museums and museum employees, because this is what we basically do as an open culture studio. We are the creative team to hire for the museum, which is funny because they are supposed to be the core of creativity, right? At the same time, they ask us to kind of come and tell them how to be creative again, because the management is something that blocks their ideas to this extent that they are in the situation when they are kind of doing over and over the same kind of projects that they were supposed to and they used to do, and they have to hire creativity from outside. I mean, and this is what we kind of try to manage. We try to manage the teams of the institutions as well as the management, but these are completely two different processes.
Are they from Mars or from Venus?
It's hard to tell. They are from from completely different space.
Yeah, it's this famous quote, right? And in the bad companies, the politics win, and the good companies, the best ideas win. And actually, this is all about that, yeah? Because you should hammer down all the time the process to get the best, the most creative outcome in the end of the day. And if the management is sick, it's simply you are simply not able to pass through. Like, this is how it is.
So I would actually answer the question. I fundamentally believe that it's the leaders that should give the direction of the culture and give the people enough room to develop the culture. Yeah, so it's obviously, and that's the cooperation. So I think I can't imagine a leader like someone, like great leaders like Steve Jobs, obviously, and stuff, or even Bill Gates at Microsoft say, okay, let my people develop the culture and I'll just lead. That's ridiculous, yeah? But on the other hand, if you try to say this is the culture and it must be this way, there is no culture because that's a dictatorship, yeah? And this is, so it's, again, it's a balancing act, yeah? But there's someone has to give the direction, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I think it is the same in all organizations, like from the top and from the bottom.
I was
And
about to
definitely,
ask.
definitely, the acceptance and understanding of the top that it is something important for us to think about the future, to think about new products, new services, but also about the culture, because we can actually buy different stuff, but without people acceptance, openness, curiosity, we're not going to be. We will not implement different kind of initiatives that we could actually have.
And I was about to ask, because your industry is not creative by definition, but you're doing
Stable business.
but you're doing a ton of creative things, different initiatives for people. Is it possible to make someone more creative, or to teach someone creativity?
I firmly believe that creativity is something to be taught, but the thing is to be really open to it. We will not change everybody to be open, to be curious, to be willing to join any kind of initiative if he or she is not interested. But organizing different types of programs, different types of initiatives that we are doing, there are different people who are jumping in, and they're from different parts of our industry. And especially, I have this pleasure to manage the team of local innovation managers. So those are people who are responsible for innovation from different companies within Veolia. So I'm always saying that they have their eyes and ears open to whatever the challenge the company is facing. So this is crucial to have this possibility to find an application for innovation. So we tend to think about curiosity and innovation in terms of innovative for the sake of innovation. But what we do, and our management board actually was the one who said it, and I'm really happy about that. It is the innovation that we do is applied innovation. So whatever we are focusing on is actually mapped within our process. So we verify what our companies, what people inside of the organization need, what are the challenges that they are facing, what changes they see within their companies, and how we as innovation department could actually support them. So it is extremely important to know how can you be part of it and how can you support people, and then when they see that you're doing something useful for them to make their life easier, it is totally changing the perspective. We are organizing different types of initiatives. We had something that was called Power of Small Changes. So those are the total improvements from our vicinity, within our vicinity. So people from around Veolia had this possibility to find the challenge that they are facing, test it, and then implement it. So we had many initiatives out of that. And we had also kind of challenges that are strategic for our business. So energy efficiency, and our management board stood up next to the window and said, this building, this is within our portfolio, and we really know that this is crucial for us to change this energy efficiency. So we organized the whole program, 50 people from organization involved into the whole process, and now we are implementing 4 pilots in Poznań and in Łódź. So making it applicable, and it is extremely important to have it pragmatic.
It sounds that the engineers are more creative than people from the museum, artists. Yeah,
We can join forces.
I'm convinced maybe there should be some kind of cooperation. Maybe you own a building or the museum, and so you could,
Definitely.
by the way, teach them some tricks. What I would like everyone here from the audience to walk away with are some actionable advice from all of you, from each one of you, on how to manage the creative teams, how to manage or lead, maybe, as we agreed. So at the same time, not to curb their creativity, but at the same time, make them work and still, meet the deadlines. There's no alphabetical order anymore. Feel free.
Okay. there's
Crazy stuff.
The man with the stick gets the stick.
yeah. To be honest, very often I'm using this kind of metaphor of like everything is like a sculpture when we do when we do anything creative at CD Projekt. People tend to be safe at first, like they want to really feel safe, so they think about the creative process, the idea, like let's say you sculpt something, so you take a piece of clay and you try to do something, right? And you try to model it. And it seems in the end that you didn't take enough clay and the size of it is not good enough, it's not big enough. And so there is this rule in creative process, anything, and modeling, animation, you name it, of exaggeration, which is like go crazy first. Like go give yourself a few days, a few hours, go crazy. Put as much clay as possible and then just simply rip it off. And this is like, everything is like sculpting and trust the process. Yeah, so because like this is the most important. People are really limiting themselves and too quickly. And they should let themselves to really spread wings, use as much as clay as possible and get rid of it and get the sculpture with the proper size and proper shape. And I really like it because it's applicable to anything, even to the code, to the engineer. We're running the event on yearly basis called Promised Land Art Festival in Łódź. And it's a mission kind of event. Who have no penny out of it, and we simply the motto of it is like united in art, and people are coming from all fields. No, doesn't matter. It's industry, advertising, the film industry, advertising, game industry, of course. And last year we invited a few engineers, and they were so surprised about how creative people, can push their creative boundaries by just showing that. Hey, go out of the comfort zone. Yeah, like check this out. Go give yourself the space, and it's really applicable to anything, any creative thing. Yeah, that would be good.
So it's go crazy, go big.
Yeah, go crazy, go big, be bold. Yeah, don't afraid. Like don't be afraid.
I would add to it, listen and translate. Listen in terms of like listen to your group of people, to your teams, because very often, like in our case, we work with IT specialists and with museum specialists. They have completely two different approaches to the same topic and to the same problem, let's say, that they have to solve. So you have to listen both of them and try to catch the best ideas on both sides, and then translate one idea to another, from one group to the other one, because this is the problem of language. They don't speak the same language, and so sometimes even if they have the same kind of idea or the same kind of approach that could be operational, it's very hard for them to kind of work together because they don't understand what they want from each other. So then you listen and then you translate. Yeah.
But I would add upon that, there is one quote. If you are quoting so much, I was like searching for different quotes. But but I'm joking. Jokes aside, there is a really simple saying: if you change nothing, nothing will change. As simple as that. Try to test. Try to put yourself into different shoes. Simply. Because we tend to focus on our own perspective and sometimes actually changing it to a different business, different person, different thing on how the thing works can actually give you a totally different perspective and lead you to a different process.
So I guess we're all building on what someone before us has said. So let me continue with this culture. If the greatest comedian of the 20th century was Richard Pryor. And Richard Pryor developed a way of developing his stand-up routine. It was then adapted by Jerry Seinfeld. It was adapted by Eddie Murphy. And how did this look? And this was already when he was considered the best, more or less. What he would do is he would rent for 30 days Comedy Central on the LA, on the Boulevard, on the Strip. And this is a very small bar with 8 tables in it, and he would show up the first night with his new jokes. He would bomb. Then he would come the second night, terrible. And people in the crowd, the 7, they're seeing the best comedian in the world, and they're like, we can't believe he's terrible. So they're begging him to come up with, to return to the jokes that were always great, yeah? And he refused, yeah? And he would just go, and then he would go 4th night, 5th night, 6th night. And more or less, at one point, he would say, this is starting to work, this is starting to work, this is starting to work. And then he would work on his craft, yeah? And then so it's exactly what you said. He would listen to the people. He had an incredible tolerance for failure, which you have to have if you're truly creative, because that's the creative process. And then he had the ear of what is resonating with the crowd, and then he would develop it. And then after 30 days, he would go on tour, and everyone would say every single joke that he made was just incredible funny, and he's an absolute genius. This guy can't go wrong. Yeah.
Awesome.
So this is, I think, the essence of creativity. Yes.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much. I think we found the common denominator for a good, for inspiring people, for making them creative. It's good leadership, trust, empathy, and of course a little bit of this ability to get challenged and not having fear to fail.
And courage.
And also not being scared of having something imperfect, because we tend to put everything inside to first piece, and it won't work in this way. Just be open and test, iterate on everything what you have.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Sebastian Kalemba,
Thank you very
Katarzyna Wszola, Natalia Cetera, Wojciech Borowski. You're welcome.
Maria, Thank you, Maria.
Bardzo dziękuję, super.